How's it going? I just wanted to do a quick reaction video. I just watched on JRE Clips a couple days ago. Apparently, Joe Rogan has been mocked by Joy Behar on The View for she's saying that he believes in dragons. You know, he talked about reptiles in the past, but he's stuck in that millions of years fallacy that the earth has been around for millions and millions of years. Actually, dragons support the Bible. You say, well, how could that be? In the King James Version of the Bible, there are over 34 mentions of the word dragon. Now, some of them are referring to Satan, sort of allegorical, but most of the time they are actually talking about real dragons, what we would call dragons. Now, how could this be? I believe, and this is supported by all the things that we know, that the Earth had a very different atmosphere before the flood of Noah. Higher air pressure, higher oxygen count. It was just a different world. We have a record of people in the Bible living to be over 900 years old. Adam, Methuselah. There are several names that are mentioned where they lived hundreds and hundreds of years, not the 70, 80, 90 years that we live nowadays. And that's because the conditions on the earth were much different before the flood of Noah. It all fits together. If you had an increase in oxygen and increase in air pressure, things would be preserved longer, things would live longer. That's why all the fossils that we find have like giant dragonflies and giant trilobites. And let's talk about dragons, okay? In 1841, they started calling them dinosaurs, okay? And that's because reptiles, for the most part, are what are called indeterminate growers. They never stop growing. Their entire lifespan, they keep growing. So, you have these creatures that are living perhaps hundreds of years, maybe not as long as men, maybe not, 900 or 1,000 years or so, but they live hundreds of years as opposed to the decades that they live now. Recently I saw a turtle that was 120 years old. They knew it to be 120 years. That's huge. A couple of kids could ride on it. It was a big turtle. Imagine if that turtle was 400 years old or 500 years old. It would be, it would be the size of a car. Okay? They are indeterminate growers. Now, every culture around the globe, I want to get into the fact that this is a globe Earth. It's not a flat Earth. The canopy theory of there being an ice canopy over the world, creating this greenhouse effect and these ideal conditions for life before the flood, does not mean that we are living under a dome like the flat earthers suggest. But the Bible talks about the waters below the firmament, which mean the firmament doesn't mean a thick barrier. The firmament is in the atmosphere, because the Bible says in Genesis 1:20 that the birds fly in the open firmament of the heaven, which means they're in the air. Okay, so firmament means the air. And it talks about waters below the firmament and waters above the firmament. Well, If you went above our atmosphere and had water, it's cold up there, so it would freeze. So picture the Earth in the center of a snow globe, and all that concentrated air pressure. It's like uh, the whole planet was like one big bariatric chamber, you know. And things lived much longer and grew much bigger. That all happened, and you can see if you start looking at the lifespans after the flood, things started to live shorter lifespans. First it was like, 400 or 500 years, and then they started living 300 years, 200 years, until finally, 100 years. And then we had the Dark Ages where you were lucky to make it to 40 because people were so brutal and warring with each other. But natural causes, yeah, we don't live as long these days. We live, maybe, if you make it to 100, you're doing great. My own mother lived to be 94, and she was done by then. The dragons. Let me go back to the dragons now. We called them dragons for centuries, millennia. And then in 1841, they came up with a new word that means terrible lizard. Yep, dinosaurs. So these things that we call dinosaurs are actually the bones of dragons. Hundreds of years old, maybe, thousands of years old, but certainly not millions of years old. It all supports the biblical narrative. Let me read you a couple of names. I wrote them down earlier. This is supported today. And this kind of explains the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie, okay? Because underwater, the atmospheric conditions would be pretty much the same as they were beforehand. And so if you have an aquatic variety of dragon or dinosaur or some kind of a sea creature, it's interesting, the word whale in Genesis, when it says God made the whales, it specifically says the whales. We think of, sperm whales, humpback whales, orcas, we think of whales that we call whales today. But in 1611, in that brand of English, the word whale also meant big fish. We know that Jonah was swallowed by alternately a whale and alternately a big fish. So the words were interchangeable. There's no contradiction there. They are the same. They're talking about the same creature. Sea serpents. If you look at Strong's Concordance of the Bible in Genesis, and it talks about whales, you'll see that sea serpent is mentioned as being a whale. So the Bible could be telling us right there in Genesis that God created, during the creation week, he created dragons or sea serpents or dinosaurs. We have a variety that swim. And I don't know their dinosaur name, but we have Loch Ness has Nessie. Lake Champlain has Champ. And these all kind of look similar. The descriptions of them are very similar. Lake Tahoe has Tessie, and Lake Tahoe is one of the deepest natural lakes in the entire world. The water is so clear, you can see down probably about 700 feet or more, if you have something to look at. Lake Okanagan up in British Columbia has Ogopogo. They have a creature that they call Ogopogo, and it's described much like Loch Ness Monster, a lot like Champ. in Africa, they have a couple of creatures. One's not necessarily aquatic, but it lives in the swamp areas. It's called Mokele Bomembe, Mokele Mbembe, African words. They also have one called Ninkananka in Africa. And the descriptions of these animals are very similar to what we would consider dragons or dinosaurs. So Joe Rogan's right, but not in the way that he thinks. He talks about the fact that there could have been large monitor lizards and large Komodo dragons, and that's true. It just wasn't as long ago as he thinks. It was probably within, 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. And that's why we find their remains. We only find the remains of the ones that were buried in the flood. That's how you get a fossil. You don't get a fossil when something dies on land. Usually on land, scavengers come and eat all the flesh, and then the bones dry out in the sun and eventually turn to dust. That's why when we don't have cow fossils and we don't have wild coyote fossils and things like that, things that die in the wild kind of absorb back into the earth in pieces, in their elements. But things that were buried rapidly, like in a flood, like in a worldwide cataclysmic flood, things that were buried rapidly are infused with the minerals and they turn into fossils. That's why we have fossils. But, we have so few. If this world was millions and millions of years old, we would have fossils coming out of our ears. But they don't. They only have just a few. And there's very few complete skeletons of anything. They just get a femur here or a rib bone here or a skull. And, they kind of extrapolate from those what the creature looked like and what it, it's all conjecture. But I believe, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that dragons, aka dinosaurs, were made during the creation week. They always lived with man. They were hunted to near extinction in the Middle Ages and so forth. St. George slaying the dragon, that kind of thing. And there are a few that still exist today, amazingly, miraculously even. And if you got to think about it, if a creature was like 500, 800, 900, 1,000 years old, it'd be pretty smart. I think it would know how to elude being seen. So, yeah, that's my take on the Joe Rogan, Joy Behar thing. And Joy Behar is completely wrong. She was mocking Joe for suggesting that he believed in dragons, where Joe is completely within his right thinking to believe in dragons. He's just got his dates wrong, okay? That's all I had for you today. I hope you're having a great weekend. It was a good Thanksgiving here. I went untraditional. I made fettuccine alfredo with loads of shrimp, and I didn't even bother doing a turkey or a ham. I just thought outside the box. So 15 minutes looks like a good time to stop. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.